All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. How you doing, girls? Good to see you. And now we are in the Sefer Yetzirah. It's our 20th class, so Mazel Tov. Congratulations on 20 classes. It's a big accomplishment. And yeah, let's hop in. We are now chapter 1, subsection 4. We ended last week's class about the different circumcisions, the covenants between Avram Avinu and Hashem and all the Jewish people, and how the covenant aligns in the middle. We spoke about the covenant of the tongue and the covenant of the reproductive organ, the member. And now we're moving on to chapter 1. There's the, oh, but it's easier to follow. Subsection 4. And let's go through the title here, and then we'll start delving into this. Okay. Esther Sfirot Blima. 10 Sfiros of nothingness. Remember, we just spoke about that the other day, Blima. Remember? 10 Sfiros of nothingness. So it says, Esther velo Tesha, 10 and not 9. Esther velo Echad Esre, 10 and not 11. And then he goes on and explains. V'havin b'chochma, understand with wisdom. V'hacham v'bina, and be wise with understanding. V'choin mehem, examine with them. V'hakor mehem, and probe from them. V'amod davar al ba'avod rav, and make each thing stand on its essence. V'hashav v'yetzer kol makavano, and make the Creator sit on his throne or his base. A lot to unpack in that short little sentence of the Sefer Yetzirah, subsection 4 and chapter 1. So let's start getting into this. So it says like this. This section deals primarily with the first 3 sfirot. Keter, which is the crown. Chochmah, which is wisdom. And Binah, which is understanding. Did you take it out already? Yeah. Later, we find a similar discussion with regard to the lower 7 sfirot in chapter 4, which is probably going to be a couple of years till we get there. But that's okay. We're not in a rush. We're here to go deep. So now we're going to start tackling this step by step about these 10 sfirot of Blima. And remember, these sfirot, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nivra. Yeah, good. These 10 sfirot are the basic means of communication that God uses to communicate with all of creation, with each one of us and all of creation. And it's from internalizing these different attributes of the sfirot that we build a relationship with God. It's how we relate to God. Just like we relate to one another through talking, through sharing, emotions, expression. These sfirot are how God expresses himself to us, and how we internalize that expression, how we express ourselves back to God and to one another. So the 10 sfirot really are the basic blocks or conduits or channels of how we interact with God and the rest of the world. And let's go into them a little bit. We're not going to every class go through all the sfirot, but each one has specific energies that are connected to them, right? Here are the 10 sfirot that we've talked about. This is the typical array of the spherotic tree that is found in many Kabbalistic diagrams and text. And now we're going to talk about, it opens up by saying 10 and not 9. The highest faculty in man is will, known as ratzon. This corresponds to the first of the sfirot, which is Keter, or the crown. We know that Keter has 3 heads to it. And they, in order, correspond to the highest head, which is Amunah. Then we have the head below that, which is Tainuk, which is pleasure. But the Sefer Yetzirah right now is referring to the lowest head of Keter, which is what we call a ratzon, or will. And everything follows the will. We know that in life. That's let's go inside, and then I could talk more after. If one were to attempt to describe God, it would be tempting to say that he is pure will. This would be very much like saying that God is spirit, or he is love, since all such descriptions attempt to depict God in terms of human traits. If any human trait were to be used, however, it should be will, since this is the highest of all human faculties. So, just to pause for a second, when it says it's the highest of all human faculties, meaning everything is connected to a ratzon, or a will. If someone has a will to do something, this is the motivating drive behind everything else. If someone does not have a will to do something, it's not going to get done. It's not going to come to fruition. They say, for example, in the world of PE, of private equity, of funding, of people who go, founders of businesses who are trying to raise money, or going through all these different channels of trying to get hedge funds and private equity, even businesses or banks, to invest in whatever idea they have. There's a saying in the private equity market that money doesn't follow ideas, it follows people. Meaning the most important thing for anyone, if they're going to invest in another person in their business, is not the idea, it's the person. Because if someone is not passionate about what it is that they're doing or selling or bringing into the world, as soon as they start hitting big obstacles, they're gonna back down, they're gonna collapse. So you can have the greatest idea in the world. If the person behind it is not willing to take that idea to the furthest stages and the furthest steps of completion, it's going to fall on its face, which is why will, or ratzon, as we say in Kabbalah, is, as we're saying now, one of the highest means of human expression, of all faculties. Anything in life always starts with a will to do it. So that's why the highest sphere of Keter is likened to will, or ratzon. So if we would say that God is pure will, however, then we would be saying that he is identical with Keter. However, Keter is merely a sphera, an attribute of God. And as such, it is something created by God and inferior to him. We therefore cannot say that God is pure will. Even will is amongst his creations and inferior to him. Therefore, there is no word that can be used to describe God's essence. There's many ways to explain and describe God, but it's not God. So it's incorrect to say that God is pure will, because that's limiting him, right? It's incorrect to say God is spiritual, because that's limiting. God creates spirituality. He creates physicality. He creates the concept of will, or ratzon, or desire. All of these things are creations. They're not God himself. In fact, once you try to explain God in any descriptive terms, you're no longer describing his essence. Now you're describing what we say is his characteristics, his giluyim, ways he interacts with the world, but it's not him. Because anytime you put a describing factor on something, it's limiting it to what it is, right? This is, unfortunately, we have this in our society, which is a lot of the reason there are a lot of challenges and difficulties, especially with the younger generation, is they get labeled. A doctor may label them, oh, this kid has ADD. A parent may label, oh, this is a wild kid. Or, a teacher may say, oh, this kid doesn't know how to learn. Once you start putting people in boxes and describing them, you're losing the ability to have that person fluid and open for expansion. And if someone is told the same thing enough times, they start to believe it. And that causes self-limitations. It causes doubts when we start limiting ourselves, because maybe at a young age, someone told us we're this kind of person, and we framed that in our mind, and we built a reality in our mind that's not real. And anytime we heard it, now unconsciously, we're reinforcing it. And then we keep hearing it. And next thing you know, we put ourselves in a box through a description that may or not be accurate. So God's essence is above description. It's above anything that we can put any type of titles or explanations to. So therefore, there's no possible word that can explain or describe God's essence. The author consequently states that the Sefirot are 10 or not 9. And again, the author, just to take us back to the first class, according to most opinions, is Avram Avinu, the first Jew. There are some opinions that say it was Adam Rishon, the first man. But when he says the author, that's what he's referring to.
10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. Okay.
Huh?
Why you need to say 10 is not 9 and 10 is not 11?
Yeah. As soon as I get this piece of food out of my teeth.
Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm. I didn't share it yet. I'm still in my mouth.
Okay.
Here it is, if you want me to share it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Share it with everyone.
Yes. It's too small to divide it up into pieces.
So it's 10 or 9 or 10 or 11?
So we're going to explain that.
Ah.
Yes, we're going to explain. Why not just say 10, right? Because, and he's going to explain now. So now we're saying 10 and 9 and 10 and not 11. Okay. For the author consequently states that the Sefirot are 10 and not 9. For we're to say that God is will, or God was one with Keter, then Keter would be identical to God, and only 9 Sefirot would remain. Right? So if we're likening God, that's why we say 10 and not 9. Because God isn't Keter. Keter is the highest of God's expressions. It's the loftiest attribute that's closest to God's essence, if you will, but it's not him. Therefore, we say it's 10 and not 9, because if we say they're 9, we're assuming that maybe someone is going to say that God and Keter are 1, and it's not. But since there are 10 Sefirot, then even will is nothing more than a Sefirah, and it is something that is inferior to the Creator. The Sefer Yetzirah also warns 10 and not 11. This is to teach that God himself, the infinite being, is not to be included amongst the Sefirot. If he were, there would be 11 rather than 10. Understand? So if we say 10 and not 9, it's because some people might mistakenly put God's attribute of Keter on the same plane as him. And if we say 11, it's assuming that God is also a Sefirah. So in other words, someone may assume, okay, God is the main Sefirah, and then there's 10 subdivisions underneath him.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that's not correct either. We don't count God as one of the Sefirot.
Okay.
So the Sefer Yetzirah is kind of branching out either up or down of places of possible error where someone may come to the conclusion that God is part of this makeup of the Sefirot, and he's not. And therefore it says, God belongs to a totally different category than the Sefirot, and it is not to be counted among them. As a result, we cannot even describe him by purely abstract qualities as will, wisdom, love, strength. These are some of the Sefirot that we explained. Because it's very easy to try to explain away what God is or who God is, and it's just impossible. It's literally impossible. Even a human being, lahavdil, you can't explain them by the characteristics. Tell me about so and so. Oh, they're a nice person. They're a kind person. But that's not their essence. You're just using terms to explain the way that person expresses himself. And unfortunately, a lot of times, and especially in our days, as we're getting closer to Mashiach and everything is really mixed up, it could be totally off. Someone could express themselves to the outside world in a particular way, and it may totally be a mask of masking who they really are, right? Psychopaths do it all the time. People who are crazy, a crazy person, you look at them like they're crazy. A psychopath, you have no idea. There's someone that could be talking, could be a neighbor, it could be a friend who appears from every stretch of the imagination, any stretch of the imagination, a normal, law-abiding member of society, very kind, and a complete undercover lunatic. That's what we call a psychopath, someone who has the capability of presenting themselves as totally normal and caring, but on what's really their mask is something totally different. So therefore we say, when the Torah makes us use of any of these qualities in relation to God, and there's many places we say in the davening every day, we say in the Chumash, it says, He is God. God, he is mighty. He is merciful. He's vengeful. He's zealous. All these descriptions of God. What it is doing, it's speaking of the Sefirot created by God and not of the Creator himself. All these, look at it in a humanistic way of clothing, if you will, that God enclothes himself in these different representations or manifestations so he can relate to all the rest of us in different ways. So if someone is a police officer during the day, they put on their police officer suit, they go to work as a police officer. And then at night, maybe they moonlight as a I don't know, bartender, somewhere out and they put on a different. This outfit is how they're representing themselves depending on their circumstances, but it doesn't define them. Okay, this is particularly important for the mystic. Keep in mind again that the Sefer Yetzirah is not just a book of knowledge. It's an actual tool. It's an actual book that was used by the ancient Makublim to climb this Sephirotic tree in the upper worlds and have their souls detached from their bodies and go and climb up to the tree and then return back down into their physical bodies. So the way the Sefer Yetzirah is written, if you look at the Hebrew and you read it carefully, it reads as an instruction manual in many places, instructing how to go about doing these things. Are there people today who are capable of doing this? I don't know anyone. It doesn't mean there aren't any. I've never heard of anyone in our generation who actually uses the Sefer Yetzirah to traverse into spiritual worlds. But this is the famous story of the parties. We heard, that 4 entered and only 1 came out normal. And that's why it's known. And I think we learned it in the introduction that anytime one of the mystics, the ancient Makublim, before they would go through these meditative practices and reach this prophetic stage where they were capable of detaching from their body and have their soul travel up the Sefirot, they would make a pact with God. They would literally make it's like a binding, like an agreement. Just like we have a contract, they would make a verbal contract with God, and they would use certain terms to basically tell God, it's like when we leave and go on a trip, kiss the mezuzah, say, may I go in peace and return in peace. It's a similar type of thing, that they made an arrangement with God where they would leave this world and that they would make a condition with God that for him to return their souls into their bodies. It's known that there's stories from the Baal Shem Tov. There was a very well-known story that one time he was very, very close to not returning to his body because the divine levels that he reached in the upper worlds were so blissful and so amazing. It took a lot of power for him to come back then to his body because he kind of felt like it was too enjoyable up in the upper worlds. Anyways, so it says this is particularly important for the mystic. A person reaches the highest levels. As a person reaches the highest levels, he might think he is actually reaching God himself. This is very important. Hello, ladies. The Sefer Yetzirah therefore warns that when one climbs the ladder of the Sefirot, there are only 10 steps, not 11. Meaning, the Creator is always beyond our grasp. If you want to take sheets and follow along, you're welcome to. So, another reason why it specifically mentions 10 and not 11, because if someone is going through these climbing of the Sephirotic tree in a deep spiritual state, you would never want them to think, okay, beyond Keter, I can grasp God. Because it's impossible to grasp God, because God is infinite, is Ein Sof. You can't.
So what is it trying to do in Sefer Yetzirah? If basically you cannot grasp God, so he's telling us what he's not. What he's trying to do, because anyway, if you're trying to say something about God, you're putting it in a box and then you're giving him a frame and you're limited. So why there's this, you understand what I'm saying? This book is trying to explain us things that are...
All of Chassidus is that way.
But Sefer Yetzirah, I feel like it's more like trying to explain us something like...
It's a blueprint for creation. It's basically showing us how God brought the world into
But
existence.
it's not about him, it's about how he created.
Yeah, correct. How he created through the Sefirot, but don't mistake the Sefirot for him.
Gotcha.
It's it's the Rambam explains that our love of God is connected to our knowledge of God. Meaning the more you come to know God, the more love you arouse for God. And so people might say, well, who cares? I don't need to love God. But the more you love God, the more you're able to manifest God's love in yourself. And that's what everyone wants, is to feel this warm love all the time, right? Like, we suffer of a generation of terrible loneliness. There's never been more tools of communication, of staying in touch, of reconnecting. And people have hundreds, thousands of friends online, on chat groups all over the world. And they're the loneliest they've ever been. Because if you're disconnected from yourself, these relationships are disconnected as well. Your relationship with another human being can only be as real as your relationship with yourself. If you have a fake relationship with yourself, if you're lying to yourself and you're disconnected from yourself and you're trying to hide your own pain and your own place of what's going on inside of you, that is what's going to manifest in all the relationships around you. It's basic mechanics of how the world works. So, all of, someone asked one time in a Farbrengen, in a Hasidic Farbrengen, God could have created the world. God could do anything. Why did he have to create Seder Histalshelus? Why does it have to be the world of Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, multiple Sfirot, all the angels, the upper brilliance, the lower brilliance, so many, like, who needs it? God could have just said, here's nothing and here's something. You can't explain that. In a logical way, could say, all right, from spiritual to manifest into physical, there has to be a process, right? There has to be stages. You can't just go from spiritual to physical. There has to be levels of, and that's what all of Seder Histalshelus is. If you study it, it's emanation to creation to formation to reality. It's different stages from creating nothing into something. But God, does he really need to do that? No, he can do anything. So what's the point of all of this stuff? And the answer that the Alter Chassid said was so we can learn Chassidus. So we can trace it and have a better awe and love and appreciation for God and have that duality relationship. So ultimately, the Sefer Yetzirah literally is, which is interesting, it's called the Book of Creation, but Yetzirah literally means formation. But it's showing how, step by step, God created the world and all the stages he used to bring reality into existence. And it's fascinating as you learn. I probably learned it at least 7 or 8 times, maybe more. It's to me the most fascinating thing ever put into writing, because it's very concise and there's just so much depth inside of it. And I find it just extremely interesting. It's not telling you, oh, you have to, what you have to do, you have to keep kosher, you have to, there's no practical things of how to live as a Jew or what to do or what not to do. It's just showing you God opening up his book, saying, here's how I created the world, step by step, which I find fascinating. So, yeah. So it is for this reason that God is called Ein Sof. Ein Sof literally means infinite, never ending, right? So there's no one in the world who is any closer to God than anyone else. Because what's closer to infinity? 1 or 100 million? It's the same thing. You would want to say 100 million is closer to infinity, but infinite keeps going forever. So there's no way to measure closeness to infinity. It's impossible. And that's why God is called Ein Sof. It means never ending, on and on forever. So one can climb higher and higher, reaching towards infinity, but you can never attain it. You can't grasp something that's infinite. Infinity may remain a goal, but it is only a goal that points to a direction, but not a goal that can actually be reached. The same is true of the infinite Ein Sof. In other words, it says it's only a goal that points to a direction, which is important to know, that we want to go in a particular direction and you want to keep going closer, whatever that means, step by step beyond from where you are, closer to this direction. But it's never ending, right? Which is why, for better or worse, often it's a frustration, because we get to a place in our life where we've all been there, where it's like, life is a struggle. I mean, let's just put that plain and simple. If you ask me, it shouldn't be so hard, but no one asked me. It's not easy. Everyone struggles. Every single person. Some people are more in tune with their struggle than others. Some people are in denial, but the reality of it is, in an internal way, we all have it's a grind. It's a struggle. It's not easy at all. That's just being alive. Now, being a Jew adds a whole nother level of complexity on top of it. And you want to go into Hasidim, and it's not easy. It's not easy work. But the idea is that the struggle that we all go through, that we all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, is just the realization of having a direction. A lot of times the reason we struggle is we feel we're just don't have a direction. We're confused. We don't know, forget about what I want to do for a living. I don't know what I want to do now. I don't want to do tomorrow. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what my goals. I don't, it's not clear. And when you don't have that clarity and you wake up every day and it's just like, everything's like in a fog and it's like hazy, it's very challenging to maneuver through life. So the general idea is to know that, just to point in a general direction, even though it seems far away. And a lot of times, like, we'll get clarity, right? So we have a hard time in life. Things are challenging. We're maneuvering, we're surfing, we're balancing, we're trying to deal with the waves. Excuse me. And then we get clarity. It happens. We all have, just as we have bad days, we have good days. We have days where it's just, things start, as they say in the secular vernacular, the stars are aligned, right? Like, you've heard that before, right? Everything just aligns. You're like, wow, I had such a great day. Like this, the person who's normally a jerk says hello. Like someone who's critical smiles. Like things that don't work. And it could be minute things. It could be things that, in a big picture of life, are meaningless. What's just simple things on a day-to-day basis. It just works. And everything's great. And wow, that felt good. And then next thing you know, you go into this like rhythm. And then before you know it, everything shifts again. Like thank God I'm not in this consciousness now, but earlier stages of my life before tshuva, we used to always joke around with our friends. We're like, uh-oh, like what? Things have been good for too long. Something bad's got to happen, because it's like every time you feel like you're going in a good place, and next thing you know, boom, you get blindsided and you get hit with a challenge or a difficult test. And that's okay, because that's part of life. But we have to be able to accept it. And the most important thing is, all right, to get back up again and refocus in a direction. And that's what he's trying to explain now, is that Ein Sof, God is infinite. You can't reach it. But to know that this is a goal, a direction to go into, is the idea. Because if we don't have a direction in life, it just compounds to the confusion of life, where we just start floating. And what happens is we go from being a active participant in life to a passive observer. So instead of engaging in life, we sit back and watch life happen. And then what makes it even worse is we become a critic to those people who are actively involved in life. So you have the people who are actively involved in doing, you have the people who are passively just looking, and then you have the people who are so upset with themselves that they're not doing, that their passive onward looking becomes critical. Look at that person. Who do they think they are? Oh, that was so stupid. Why did he do that? It's like, they call them armchair quarterbacks, right? The guys are in the game playing football, and the guy's sitting with his remote control. Pass, you moron, pass. And it's like, what are you doing? Are you there in the game under the pressure with all this going on? It's very easy for you to sit in your chair with your popcorn screaming at the guy what to do. And that's what happens, unfortunately, a lot of times, is we become critics. And that's the worst thing ever. Because it's like, what are you contributing? You don't want to contribute to the world? Fine. Shut up and sit and read book and don't do anything. But to criticize the people who are trying to do good in the world, this is the worst thing ever. So the same idea comes from this concept of like not having a direction, not having a purpose, not knowing where there is to go. And life, in a way, like God, lahabdil, you never really reach your goals, because your goals keep pushing further ahead. It's the nature of a human being. We're always going to want more, and we're never going to really be satisfied where things are. Because if we reach a place of satisfaction today, tomorrow it's no longer satisfying. It's like, right? You get to a place where you feel good, But then what happens is you adjust to that place in your life, and then it's no longer something new or exciting. It's just that's part of it, and then you're looking for the next thing, right? Now what? Now what happens, right? Even as a passive. Yeah, sure.
What's the meaning of this Ein Sof? And it's also in the alternative holistic world of the eight and the Ein Sof. There's no end, there's no beginning.
Yes.
What's so special about this meaning of no end, no beginning, no end? What is this so? I got it, that God, but what is the meaning of it in general that they are using it? In the Deutsch world, the eight, the Ein Sof. What do they gain from it when you see the eight and you're drawing eight and who cares at this beginning? What is? I'm trying to figure it out.
Because it's something beyond our grasp or comprehension. So there's always some level of mystery, of the unknown. You know, everyone loves secrets, right? You want to get someone's attention, like you could be, I don't say, I gotta tell you something, don't tell anyone. Right away. Like, say, you know, there's something about this whole idea of forbidden knowledge, of things that shouldn't be told, of secret, that every single movie, book, story is all about how much to reveal and when. It's
suspension.
Yeah, it's a good movie, a good book. It keeps you, like, you know, because it strings you along, and they're always a few steps ahead of you, and you're trying to figure out what's going on next, and then they say, well, this direction and this direction, and then it's this anticipation of trying to figure out, and it's just a formula of how much do I want to reveal at what point in time. There's and I hate to use such a crass example, but whatever popped in my mind, even in a romantic situation with a seduction situation, right? There's clothing, right? Like, you know, like take off one little piece of clothing, kind of thing. You know, there's this like game of seduction of not just like, you know, like here I am naked. Like it's like, whoa, you know, it's like, and it used to be back when things were a little bit normal that like a man and woman would meet, and there's this, you know, like playful engagement before, you know, now it's like you press a button, you want to have sex? Yes, me too. Okay, let's meet at 5 o'clock. It's just like, what is that? It's insane. There's just no, I don't know how to explain even the word for it. It's gross. It's, you know, so in reality, God is playing all the time hide and seek with us. It's like, you know, they art mirrors reality. And there's this constant dance, if you will, of leading, of following, of leading. You know, life becomes interesting. Like, it's exciting if you're dating and you meet someone new, and you know, it's like, you have a new friend, or you find a new hobby. It's like, you know, there's this constant work of, it's a dance, really. Life is like a dance, right? Like sometimes you're leading, sometimes you're following. Hello. Sometimes you're holding back, sometimes you're moving ahead. These are the sroot of netzek and hod, of how much to go ahead and how much to hold back, and how to navigate this energy in reality. And God's doing it with us all the time. There's a dance. So he's leading us in a particular way, and we're going down a particular path, and then all of a sudden he'll point us in a different direction. And it can be very frustrating, because it's like, you know, nothing's more frustrating than putting a lot of time and energy and effort into something, and then it doesn't work. It falls apart, it collapses, whether that's a relationship or a friendship or a business deal or anything in life. You know, imagine you're like, you know, building a puzzle or something, and you get to the end and it's missing a few pieces. It's like, what the hell did I just do this for? But this is the dance of life. And this is the idea of Ein Sof. Ein Sof means you can't grasp it. It's something beyond your capabilities of tangibly holding onto it. So Hashem is Ein Sof, and the idea behind it is letting us know that you can't grasp him, just like you can't grasp infinity. It's something beyond, it's something removed. And one of the biggest problems or challenges or difficulties we find ourselves in as human beings is getting angry or souring our relationship with God because we can't wrap our brain about why he would possibly do X, Y, or Z to me or someone I love, or like, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. It took a very long time before I can even make a first step towards Judaism because of the Holocaust. It was like, I don't want nothing to do with this. Where was God? What was he skiing during the Holocaust when Hitler Yamachshon was murdered 6 million Jews? How do you explain such a thing? So when you try to use your logical brain to understand an infinite God, it's impossible. Before you start, you're finished because you can't explain infinity with finitude. You can't take a finite brain around an infinite God. And you could break your head from now to a million years. It's impossible. So the idea of infinity is just this, it's something that's not graspable, that you just can't grasp. It's beyond your capabilities of trying to grasp. People try to do it all the time, but they like to use this idea of it's infinite. It's what does that mean? It's depending on how each person uses it, but it's this idea of beyond grasping, beyond comprehending. Okay, let's start a little bit into the next section. Okay, understanding with wisdom. As discussed earlier, understanding Bina in verb, we just talked about this last night, about Chokmah and Bina. It says, understand with wisdom and be wise with understanding. It says, Chokmah and Bina are the two twins that never separate. Meaning, the overwhelming majority of challenges and problems that children experience, and this is a bold statement that I'm making, but I'm going to make it anyways. Oh, that's nice. My phone just shut off. Yeah. There's always has to be something with my technical problems. Oh, did I run out of a battery? Okay. Now this computer's working, but now the phone's not working. There always has to be a little glitch somewhere. So an overwhelming challenge that children face is 100% connected to their parents. Because if you look at the Sefirot over here, at the divine tree, Chokmah and Bina are the two upper Sefirot. Keter, which is the energy that comes through God, the highest level, is above Chokmah and Bina. What's down here is what we call Zah, which is Zah and Malchus, which are the emotions. These are called the parents, and these are called the offspring. So when the parents, Chokmah and Bina, mother and father, are face to face, meaning there's a healthy relationship of a healthy respect, energy transfer, and balance between the masculine and feminine energies at home, between the father and the mother, then the children, the emotional attributes, the offspring, will fall into place and be healthy. When there's a back-to-back relationship between the mother and father, meaning anger, frustration, I don't mean like people get in disagreements, fine. I'm talking about an ongoing, I come from a divorced home, I'm talking about an ongoing challenges, fighting, difficulties, just a lot of, from an emotional standpoint, it's not possible for those children to be whole because the energy that's bringing them into existence isn't whole. So the idea between Chokmah and Bina energy is they must be face to face. And that's why the Sefer Yetzirah says, understanding with wisdom, which is Bina with Chokmah, and be wise with understanding, which is Chokmah with Bina. Because before you have these two energies connected, nothing is going to work. It's impossible to build the rest of the spherotic tree and the rest of the energy without having these energies face to face. And that's why it's so important to have them together. And that's why it's a problem. I'll just end with this thought since someone's standing over me with.
No.
Okay. I thought you were doing me signs.
No.
So, oh yeah, it's time. All right, I'm gonna finish up. But that's why it's very challenging when you see in the secular world. You know, you hear conversations of, oh, he wears the pants or she wears the pants. You go into a home and it's like when the energy isn't balanced between the husband and the wife, it automatically causes a whole disarray of the energy that comes from below it, which are the emotional attributes. So we'll stop there, understand with wisdom, and we will get into a little bit deeper next time about this relationship between the Chokmah and Bina energy, which in a way, almost the whole Sefer Yetzirah is about, because it starts with there's 32 mystical paths of wisdom. Wisdom is Chokmah, 32 is connected to Bina, which is the lave, which is the heart. So for creation to take place, for God and for in homes in a proper way, in a proper energy, these two energies have to be balanced. If they're out of whack, everything comes below it, gets out of whack. Okay, thank you. To be continued. See you later. Hasta luego. I'm